Retrofuture, inside the 1950s of an alternate civilization. Chapter 1. The experiment that opened a door to the impossible. Under the brilliant white lights of the quantum physics laboratory at MIT, while the hum of advanced machinery created a symphony of scientific progress around me, I never imagined that a single miscalculation would transport me to a world where the 1950s had evolved into something beyond my wildest dreams. My name is Dr. Maya Chen, and I'm a quantum physicist specializing in parallel dimension theory. For the past 3 years, I've been working on what my colleagues considered a theoretical impossibility, a device capable of detecting and potentially accessing alternate realities. The quantum resonance chamber, as I had named it, was based on the principle that every decision, every moment in history, creates branching timelines where different outcomes occur. My theory was that these parallel dimensions exist simultaneously, separated only by quantum barriers that could theoretically be penetrated. On that fateful Tuesday evening in October 2024, I was conducting what I thought would be a routine calibration test. The chamber was humming with energy, its crystalline core pulsing with an otherworldly blue light, when something went wrong, or perhaps went exactly as it was meant to. A power surge caused the quantum field to destabilize, and before I could shut down the system, the chamber erupted in a blinding flash of light. I felt my body being pulled apart at the molecular level, stretched across dimensions I couldn't comprehend, and then I woke up on a sidewalk made of what appeared to be polished chrome, surrounded by buildings that defied everything I knew about 1950s architecture, in a world where the impossible had become everyday reality. If you think you can imagine what I discovered in this alternate 1950s, I assure you that the civilization I encountered was more advanced, more beautiful, and more inspiring than anything science fiction had ever dared to envision. Chapter 2. The world that rewrote everything I knew about progress. As I struggled to my feet on that gleaming chrome sidewalk, the first thing that struck me wasn't the impossible architecture or the strange technology. It was the sky. Above me stretched a canopy of soft, pearl-colored light that seemed to emanate from the atmosphere itself, creating a gentle, eternal twilight that was neither day nor night. The buildings around me soared impossibly high, their Art Deco curves and streamlined surfaces reminiscent of 1950s design aesthetics, but executed with materials and engineering that shouldn't have existed for another century. Glass that seemed to bend light around itself, metals that shifted color with the viewing angle, and structures that appeared to float without visible support. "Are you all right, miss?" asked a concerned voice behind me. I turned to see a woman approaching, and my breath caught in my throat. She was dressed in what was unmistakably 1950s fashion, a fitted dress with a full skirt, perfectly styled hair, and elegant gloves. But her clothing seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, and her accessories included devices I couldn't begin to identify. I think I'm lost," I managed to say, still trying to process what I was seeing. "Lost?" The woman smiled kindly. "Well, that's easily remedied. I'm Betty Morrison, and this is downtown New Angeles. Where were you trying to get to?" New Angeles? I looked around more carefully and realized that while the layout seemed familiar, this was definitely not any city I knew. The streets were filled with vehicles that looked like classic 1950s cars but hovered several feet above the ground, moving in perfect silent coordination. "I'm Dr. Maya Chen," I said, deciding that honesty might be my best approach. "And I think I'm not from around here, not from around anywhere you'd recognize." Betty's eyes widened with interest rather than alarm. "Oh my, are you a dimensional traveler? How exciting! We haven't had one of those in months." The casual way she mentioned dimensional travel made my head spin. In my world, I was pioneering theoretical. Chapter 4. The history that revealed the power of choice. The historical exhibits in the cultural center told a story that was both familiar and radically different from my world's timeline. Up until 1943, the histories were nearly identical. The same wars, the same struggles, the same technological developments. But then came the pivotal moment that changed everything. In your world, explained Dr. Robert Sterling, the center's chief historian whom Betty had introduced me to, what happened to atomic research during World War II? It led to the atomic bomb, I replied. The Manhattan Project. Dr. Sterling nodded sadly. In our timeline, Dr. Eleanor Hartwell was part of that same project. But instead of focusing on weapons, she had a breakthrough in understanding quantum energy that made atomic weapons obsolete before they were ever built. He showed me documents and photographs from that crucial period. In this world, Hartwell had convinced world leaders that her quantum energy technology could provide unlimited power for peaceful purposes, making the resource scarcity that drove most conflicts irrelevant. The war ended not with destruction, but with abundance, Dr. Sterling continued. When every nation could have unlimited clean energy, the motivations for conflict simply disappeared. But surely there were still disagreements, political differences, I asked. Of course, Dr. Sterling smiled. But when people aren't fighting over resources, when everyone's basic needs are met, conflicts become discussions rather than wars. We learn to solve problems through collaboration rather than competition. As I studied the historical timeline, I began to understand how one crucial decision, one woman's choice to pursue peace over power, had created an entirely different trajectory for human civilization. What happened to Dr. Hartwell? I asked. She lived to be 97, Dr. Sterling replied. She spent her later years traveling between dimensions, studying how different choices create different realities. In fact, she left behind detailed notes about dimensional travel that might help you return to your own world. Chapter 5. The technology that redefined possibility. Dr. Sterling led me to what he called the Hartwell Archive, a section of the Cultural Center dedicated to preserving Eleanor Hartwell's research and discoveries. What I found there was a treasure trove of scientific knowledge that was decades ahead of anything in my world. Dr. Hartwell believed that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around, Dr. Sterling explained as he showed me her original research notes. Every invention, every breakthrough was evaluated not just for its technical feasibility, but for its potential impact on human well-being. The quantum energy technology was just the beginning. Hartwell's research had led to advances in medicine that had eliminated most diseases, transportation systems that had made the world truly connected, and communication technologies that allowed for perfect understanding between people of different languages and cultures. This is incredible, I said, studying diagrams for devices that seemed like magic. In my world, we're still struggling with climate change, energy scarcity, and global inequality. Those problems are solvable, Dr. Sterling assured me. Dr. Hartwell proved that. The question is whether your world is ready to make the choices necessary to solve them. As I delved deeper into Hartwell's notes, I found detailed theories about dimensional travel and parallel realities. According to her research, every dimension represented a different set of choices made by humanity, and it was possible to learn from other realities to improve your own. She believed that dimensional travelers like yourself were meant to be bridges, Dr. Sterling explained, people who could see what was possible and bring that knowledge back to their own worlds. But how do I get back? I asked. Dr. Sterling smiled and pulled out a device that looked like a more advanced version of my own quantum resonance chamber. Dr. Hartwell anticipated that question. She left detailed instructions for building a dimensional return device. Chapter 6. The revelation that changed my perspective forever. As Dr. Sterling and I worked together to understand Hartwell's dimensional travel technology, I began to realize that my arrival in this world might not have been as accidental as I had thought. Dr. Hartwell's notes mention something called quantum resonance attraction, Dr. Sterling explained. The theory that dimensional barriers are weakest between realities that need to learn from each other. You're saying I was drawn here for a reason. I'm saying that your world might be approaching its own great divergence moment, Dr. Sterling replied. A point where the choices made will determine whether humanity follows a path of cooperation or conflict. Over the following days, as I explored more of this remarkable civilization, I began to understand what he meant. This world had solved problems that my world was still struggling with, not through superior intelligence or resources, but through different choices about priorities and values. I met scientists who collaborated freely across national boundaries, artists who created beauty for its own sake, rather than commercial success, and leaders who made decisions based on long-term benefit for all rather than short-term gain for few. The key insight, explained Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, a quantum physicist who had continued Hartwell's work, was realizing that competition and cooperation aren't opposites. They're different tools for different situations. We compete in creativity and innovation, but we cooperate in sharing the benefits. In my world, we seem to have it backwards, I observed. We cooperate in maintaining the status quo, but compete for basic resources. That's exactly the pattern Dr. Hartwell identified in her dimensional studies, Dr. Chen replied. Worlds that prioritize competition over cooperation tend to create scarcity even when abundance is possible. As I prepared to return to my own dimension, I realized that I wasn't just going back with scientific knowledge. I was returning with a completely new understanding of what human civilization could become. Chapter 7. The choice that would define my future. The dimensional return device was nearly complete, but as the moment of my departure approached, I found myself facing an unexpected dilemma. Betty Morrison, who had become my guide and friend during my stay, made an offer that I hadn't anticipated. "You could stay," she said, as we stood in the laboratory where the return device hummed with quantum energy. Dr. Hartwell's research shows that dimensional travelers can choose to permanently relocate to alternate realities. The temptation was enormous. This world had solved virtually every problem that plagued my own reality. Here, I could continue my research in an environment where scientific collaboration was the norm, where resources were unlimited, and where the pursuit of knowledge was valued above personal gain. But that wouldn't be right, I said, though the words were difficult to speak. My world needs what I've learned here. If I stay, that knowledge dies with me. Betty smiled with understanding. Dr. Hartwell faced the same choice many times in her dimensional travels. She always chose to return, to share what she had learned. And if I go back and no one believes me, if I can't convince people to make different choices, then you'll have tried, Betty replied. And sometimes one person trying is enough to start the change. Dr. Sterling approached with the final component for the return device. Dr. Hartwell left something for dimensional travelers, he said, handing me a small crystalline device. It's a quantum memory recorder. It will preserve not just your memories of this place, but the emotional and sensory experiences that make those memories real. Why is that important? Because, Dr. Sterling explained, people don't change their minds based on facts alone. They change based on feeling what's possible. As I held the device, I felt a surge of determination. I would return to my world, and I would find a way to share not just the scientific knowledge I had gained, but the vision of what humanity could become. Chapter 8. The journey home that transformed everything. The return journey through dimensional space was unlike anything I had experienced. As the quantum barriers dissolved around me, I felt myself being pulled back through layers of reality, each one showing me glimpses of other possible worlds, some better than the one I had visited, others far worse. But the quantum memory recorder was working, preserving every detail of my experience in the alternate 1950s. I could feel the knowledge settling into my consciousness, not just as information, but as lived experience that would shape every decision I made going forward. When I materialized back in my laboratory at MIT, the first thing I noticed was how different everything looked. The same equipment, the same walls, the same fluorescent lighting, but now I could see the potential for so much more. My colleagues found me unconscious on the laboratory floor the next morning, apparently having been there all night. The official explanation was that I had suffered a minor electrical shock from the experimental equipment and experienced hallucinations during my unconsciousness. But I knew better, and more importantly, I had proof. The quantum memory recorder had survived the dimensional transition, and when I connected it to my computer systems, it began downloading terabytes of information, scientific formulas, technological blueprints, social organizational models, and most importantly, detailed documentation of how one world had chosen cooperation over competition. "Maya, this is incredible," said Dr. James Rodriguez, my research partner, as we reviewed the data. "These energy equations are decades ahead of anything we've theorized. Where did this come from?" "From a world where they made different choices," I replied. "And now we have the opportunity to make those same choices." Chapter 9. The mission that began with a single step. Over the following months, I began the delicate process of introducing the knowledge I had gained to my own world. I started small, publishing papers on quantum energy theory that were based on Hartwell's research, but presented as original discoveries. The scientific community's response was electric. The energy equations I had brought back promised solutions to climate change, resource scarcity, and technological limitations that had seemed insurmountable. But I knew that technology alone wouldn't be enough. The real lesson from the alternate 1950s was that social and ethical choices were just as important as scientific breakthroughs. I began speaking at conferences, not just about the technical aspects of quantum energy, but about the importance of ensuring that new technologies served all of humanity rather than just the wealthy and powerful. "We stand at a crossroads," I told an audience of world leaders at a United Nations climate summit. "We have the knowledge to solve our greatest challenges. The question is whether we have the wisdom to choose cooperation over competition, abundance over scarcity, and long-term thinking over short-term gain." The quantum memory recorder allowed me to share not just facts and figures, but the actual experience of living in a world where those choices had been made. When people could feel what was possible, they began to believe that change was achievable. Slowly, partnerships began forming between nations that had previously been rivals. Research collaborations replaced competitive secrecy. And most importantly, the conversation shifted from "how do we get more" to "how do we share what we have?" Chapter 10. The transformation that proved anything is possible. Today, 5 years after my journey to the alternate 1950s, I can see the beginnings of our own great divergence taking shape. The quantum energy technology I brought back has been successfully tested and is beginning to be implemented worldwide, with international agreements ensuring that it remains freely available to all nations. But the real transformation has been in how we approach problems. The model of cooperation and shared benefit that I witnessed in the alternate dimension has begun to take root in our own world. Climate change initiatives now operate as global collaborations rather than competitive national programs. Medical research is shared freely between countries, accelerating the development of treatments and cures. And most remarkably, The conversation about artificial intelligence and advanced technology now centers on how to ensure these tools benefit everyone rather than just their creators. "You've started something remarkable," Dr. Rodriguez told me recently as we watched the first quantum energy plant come online, providing clean, unlimited power to an entire region. "But how do you know we're making the right choices?" I smiled, thinking of Betty Morrison and Dr. Sterling and all the people I had met in that remarkable alternate world. "Because I've seen where the right choices lead," I replied. "And I know that if one version of humanity could create that kind of civilization, so can we." The quantum memory recorder sits on my desk as I write this, still containing the experiences and knowledge from my dimensional journey. But more than that, it contains hope, proof that no matter how difficult our current challenges seem, there are always better choices we can make. My journey to the alternate 1950s taught me that the future isn't predetermined. Every day, every decision, every choice we make as individuals and as a species creates the reality we'll live in tomorrow. And if I learned anything from Dr. Eleanor Hartwell's legacy, it's that one person's choice to pursue the greater good over personal gain can literally change the world. The transformation of our reality has only just begun, but I've seen where it can lead. And that vision of what's possible gives me the strength to keep working, keep hoping, and keep believing that humanity's greatest achievements are still ahead of us. After all, I've been to the future, and it's more beautiful than we ever dared to imagine. Did you enjoy this fascinating story? Then don't forget to follow for the next ones. By the way, an even better story is appearing on your screen right now. Click on it and I'll meet you there.